Well, good morning, everyone. This is Chris Dew with E1, and I am the Popdock product manager. And I'm excited to spend a little bit of time with you this morning as we discuss how we can see historical Dynamics SL data right inside of the Acumatica interface. So let's get started. Quick agenda. We're going to discuss a couple little terms that we'll be using throughout the conversation today. We'll talk just a little bit about the overall migration strategy and where everything fits in there, and then we'll spend the bulk of our time talking about how we can view that historical data from SL right inside of Acumatica. Okay, terms. Azure Data Lake. You're going to hear this a lot today. And again, some of you out there may know exactly what this is. Some may have heard it, and just it's a magical term. I want to take some of that magic out of it today. It is really a place in your Azure account. So again, as a customer, the customer will have an Azure account, and it's basically a storage account where we can store all kinds of unstructured data. So what does unstructured data mean? It means it can be a file that's a CSV file, or it could be XML, or it could be a PDF, or a JPEG, or Excel. Whatever it needs to be, you can store information out there. And unlike a database in the past that has a very specific way that we have to store data in tables, this says, hey, just throw files out there. So why do we use an Azure Data Lake? It's an incredibly cost-effective way of storing this data. And again, as we're talking about history data, this is maybe data that you don't need to use all the time, right? It's maybe something that there's a lifespan to it too, right? You may have still maybe the last 7 years of your SL data is primarily what you're going to be hitting until you no longer need to look at it. Or some people have other requirements too. There's regulatory requirements that may require 10 years or 15 years, or again 7 years is probably the most common I hear. There's other people that just need to see some more specific like sales transaction history or vendor payment history, and again that may not have an expiration on it, as far as 7 years. So anyway, just a really cost-effective way of storing that data and still being able to access it. Now, I'll say one more thing before we get into the Popdock tool, is that this is typically, in the past, has been more of a developer type of experience. And so what we try to do at E1, we try to make that an experience that a consultant or someone that's a business analyst can handle at the customer's site, as opposed to always having to go back to a developer or IT person. Okay, so that brings up the next term, right? The Popdock Data Lake upload tool. And this is something that is part of the Popdock solution that is going to assist us, so you don't need to be a developer, right? So it allows us to connect to our information. And again, in this case, SL, right? We're connecting to our SL SQL database. We're doing it on-prem, and then it handles the uploading to the Azure Data Lake for us and creating everything inside of Popdock so that we can access it. So I think that's all I'll say about that right now, and we'll kind of get into it throughout the conversation. Just maybe a quick little thing to talk about the overall migration strategy. I want to point out that the tools we're talking about today are not going to take you from SL to Acumatica, right? I think there's various other tools that you can use to have that tool set to move over master records and maybe some opening balances and those things like that, which is all great. But where people struggle is, how do I pull that entire history, right? I've been using SL for 10 years or 20 years. How do I get all of that history? I can't lose that simply by going to the new system. And so this is where this comes in, because we can take any of these systems, no matter if it's an on-prem SL, or maybe one that's been hosted by a partner, or again maybe it's even something that you've moved to the Azure cloud already. Maybe it's on a virtual machine, or a very few people have actually put it into like an Azure SQL server. Whatever the case may be, we can get at that data and we can archive it for you so that we can also make it available right inside of the Acumatica interface. So I just kind of wanted to talk about that whole strategy and just make sure that you understand that the part of the tool we're talking about today is really on historical data access as opposed to moving over all of your accounts and customers and vendors into Acumatica. Okay, so again, we're going to focus on accessing the history inside of the Acumatica interface. So let's cover just a couple points here before I show you a demo. You have a lot of options on how you want to see this. So we can see just the history coming from SL. We could actually do the history from SL plus the new information that's inside of Acumatica. So we can have one list that has that combined history and new transactions in one place, so you don't have to go all over the place looking for it. You can have just that specific set of records. We can also we can even do some pretty cool things where we can filter the list down by customer or vendor or account or inventory item, whatever it may be. It allows us to kind of provide context to the data, so we're not pulling tens of thousands or hundreds or millions millions of records. We're only pulling the ones that are particular to when I pull up that customer page or that vendor page or item page. Okay, I think we should jump right in and show you what this is all about. So let me flip over to that screen. And instead of going right to Popdock, I think we'll jump right inside of Acumatica, because that's what we're talking about. How do I see this information inside of Acumatica? If I go ahead and click on the data views inside of here, you'll see I have a little dashboard set up. So we basically have Popdock embedded right inside of here. And what this is going to allow us to do is to pull all kinds of data that I want inside of here. So in this case, right, we're pulling from SL, and we want to be able to see the history that has been archived in a data lake in this case. And so I'll go ahead and click on, we'll do AR transactions. Now, you'll also see, even though we moved this to a data lake, we still have kept the company structure intact so that you can actually do reporting across multiple companies. So in this case, I'll go grab some information from Kotoso, and now you'll see right inside of Acumatica, it's going out, grabbing that history from SL, and now we have it right inside of this interface. It doesn't look and feel like a foreign application, right? This feels native to the Acumatica environment. And maybe to kind of just take it back, right? If you are using those quick queries inside of SL, this is basically what it's allowing us to do, is take those lists and make those available, because some of those are really great lists because they have information across multiple tables, right? They've basically already done like a SQL view, if you will, that pulled the right data together and gives us access to all the information you're expecting. The things I want to point out though inside of here is that you have, even though this is in a data lake, we can go ahead and, if we want to add a couple of fields in here, I can still add those additional ones that may not be part of the defaults, but oops, there we go. And so there we go. There's the fields that we added, but we can still be able to look at that information. You can also see we have, in this case, we have, looks like there's probably a number of customers. Got a sizing issue here. There we go. So we have a couple, it looks like there's only a couple, I'm only pulling the first 100 records, so we have a couple of records in here. But what I want to point out is that if we scroll over, you can actually see that because I drug it up by customer ID, we're actually getting subtotals, not only by customer, but we're also getting it with an overall subtotal of what's in there. So there's some really cool things that, again, you get just by having Popdock inside of here, is it allows us to work with the data. We can have an unlimited amount of filters, right? So you just go inside of here and you just keep mashing on this button and create as many filters as you like. And it's really, really powerful to get down to those areas of the product that you want. Even further to this is creating favorites, right? Once you get the filters down the way you like, maybe it's saying, hey, show me everything for last year or last month or last quarter or this week, this month. Those are great favorites to have in there because you never have to change the dates. And you now can have 10 favorites and quickly go between them as you see fit. So just want to show you that right? This is how easy it is we can embed this inside of here in a matter of minutes, and we can now make all kinds of data displayed right inside of this interface. All right, let's jump back to here real quick. So the question you might be saying is, how does the data get there, right? How do we get it out of the SL system, and how do we move it to the data lake so that I can, hopefully one day retire that SQL server and just have everything pointing, in one place. And so we're going to this next little section, we're going to talk about how we can connect to that data on-prem, and then we'll get more into moving that data. So with the tool, we're going to show you in just a second, the Popdock Data Lake upload tool. It doesn't require opening your SQL server up to the internet, right? You don't have to put any ports in there. You don't have to poke a hole in your firewall. This is something that is running on premise, and so it solves a lot of the security concerns that people have. And even, I'll say this, in the past, we still do. We still have an SL gateway that you can install, but there's some complexities, right, as you open up that information to the internet. I mean, again, we have a pretty good documentation on how you can lock it down, but it's an area of concern for people. So this is one of those things that we introduced that I think really solves a lot of those things and makes sure that it's a secure mechanism or secure way of doing this. Another part, right, is that we can pull all SL lists, and I'll use that list term very generically. We kind of call everything inside of Popdock lists. So it doesn't matter if it's coming from a CSV file or a SQL statement or an API, right? Like it could be a REST API, or it could be something dedicated. Whatever it is, we call them lists at the end of the day. And again, specifically when we're talking about on the SL side of things, is the quick queries, right? So the quick queries are basically those views that have already been set up that have all the information you need, and you have the capability of creating new quick queries, which is really awesome because I know some people out there have done that and done some really effective ones, but we'll be able to pull all the standard ones and all of the custom ones that you've created as well. In addition, we can also pull the entire database. So what does that mean, right? Is anything that's in there, it doesn't even have to be just one of the standard tables for SL. It could be from third-party products. It could be maybe just a custom table that you've created and have a solution for. We're going to give you the capability of backing that whole thing up. Now you might say, why is that important? Well, I think it's important to do because well, I call it this. I call it the insurance policy. So the first option, right, with the lists, when we're looking at here, the list is probably the ones you're going to use when you're looking up history. But then there'll come that time when you'll be like, you know what, we're missing a table. There's some other thing here that wasn't part of that list. And so we want to make sure that when you shut that SQL server off, that you still have access to that. So that's why we provide this insurance policy that says, hey, we moved everything to the data lake so that you can access it whenever you need to, and you don't have to, fire up a SQL server. Okay, so that's the connection to the data. So we're connecting to it again on-prem. But then how do we move it? So again, it runs in your environment. So once we establish the connection to your SL server, there's not even an additional server that's needed. So this is an important point. I think a lot of people get excited about this. Like, you don't have to run this on the same server that SL is on or the SQL server is on. You can even run it on a workstation if you want. It just has to be on the same network and have connectivity to your SQL server. Then we obviously have to extract the data, right? So we're moving that data as fast as we can get it out. And so what does that mean? People want to know, like, how long does this process take? And it's always a very ambiguous answer, because if they have, a gigabyte of data, it's not going to take very long. If they have a terabyte of data, it's going to take a little bit longer, because we have to do two things, right? We have to move it out of the SQL So we're essentially running all the SQL statements to extract it out and get it into files, and then we're uploading those files. So just so that you know that, again, if you're moving a couple gigs, I mean, you're probably talking minutes. If you're moving, tens of gigs, you're probably talking hours. If you start moving hundreds of gigs, you start potentially could get over, more than one day in that. So just to kind of give you an idea of that, but a big part to that is going to be your connectivity to the internet, right? Well, okay, two things. Well, let's talk about two things. So one, right, extracting it out of the SQL Server. If you have a really old SQL Server that's on an old version of Windows and an old processor and stuff like that, and it's slow, obviously it's one of those things that it might take longer to extract that data out because we're at the mercy of, we can only do it as fast as we can get the data from SQL. The other part, though, is when we're uploading the files, it's your connectivity to the internet. And so if you have a really good upload speed, it might go very, very fast. We had one, this was an SL one as well. They were in a very remote part and they had slow internet and they had a really old server. And so we had to work through a couple of obstacles there, but just to prepare you, I guess, right, is if there is concern on either of those ends, whether it be an older hardware or again maybe even the connectivity to the internet, that it can add some additional time on. The other part too, I think in here that's important is that we have the capability of fixing errors as we're moving it inside of that system. We can now, basically before having to run the whole thing again, we can run just one piece. And so we'll talk about that in just a second. Okay, so let's jump into a demo. Let's show you what this tool looks like. So this is the Popdock Data Lake upload tool. What's important about this, right, is it's something that is included with your Popdock subscription. And so there's not an additional charge for this, but the very first thing we're going to do as we run this tool, you're going to log into your Popdock account. So I'm logging in there, so I'll go ahead and do that. The next thing that's going to pop up is it's going to ask me for some information about the data lake that I have. And so I'm pointing to this Azure Data Lake that's been set up inside of Popdock, and we're going to put everything in this particular container. Now, this is the part where we start connecting to your on-premise environment, right? This is running on-premise, and so you are going to be looking at this, and again, you probably won't have an address like I have, right? Mine looks like it's on the internet. Yours might just be SQL Server or something like that, or SL Server, or whatever it may be. But you're pointing to your SQL Server. You're going to point to your SL system database. You'll log in with a SQL user. It does not need to be SA. It just needs to be a user that has access to all those databases and tables, and probably more importantly, the sys objects, be able to run sys objects so that we can get all the metadata on the tables and views. So we'll connect to that information, and now we're going to be able to see all the companies that are on there. And so why is this important? This is important because you can choose which ones you want to make available in the data lake. And again, there's all kinds of scenarios. There's maybe you have been using a sandbox that doesn't make sense, right? Why do we need to archive that for the next 10 years? Because it has no meaningful data in there. Or maybe it's a company that you haven't run in 5 years. So whatever the case is, you can pick and choose which ones you're going to do. So why don't I do this? I'm going to just remove a couple of them just to kind of speed up my process. So now, once we go to this next screen, what we'll see is that this is all of those lists or quick queries, right, that are coming from SL. So again, most of these are pretty standard, but you'll see even like George 2, that's one that I've created. So we'll go ahead and get this process starting. So what I want to point out a couple things. You can see that it says at the top here, it's going to run 327 SQL statements essentially, right? It's going to be hitting that many, one for each company. So that's why there's probably 109, I guess, in each of these, and we're doing it 3 times because we have 3 companies. You can see how many are remaining, right? So you can see that there's 200 of these remaining. We've completed 12 of them, and we've skipped most of them. So these are ones that don't have any data in them. So a lot of these companies are just sample companies that may not have much data outside of, just a couple of different areas. And so this is a key just so that you understand that we're not putting up a bunch of blank and empty files. We're only putting the ones that have meaningful data that you put out there. All right. We'll let this, while this is cranking away, let me step back into Popdock for a second. And if I go into the connectors inside of here, what I want to show you is that we have this Azure Data Lake SL. This is the one where we're putting some information into. If I go and look at the list in here, you can see, here we go. They're all starting to show up inside of here. And so this is the configuration for them. If we go ahead and look at like accounts, for example, what we'll see is we'll see all the fields that came from that particular account. Even like looks like the user defined type stuff in here. We're pulling in the data types that may be inside of here. So whether it's a string or a yes, no, or maybe a currency or quantity or something like that. And you can even choose if you want to summarize it, right? So you have those capabilities right inside of here. You can still do, even though it's in a data lake, you can still do calculated fields. So this is really powerful because you still can, even though it's no longer in the SQL server, you can still work with it and do some really cool things. We can even choose which fields will default. So you can see on this one, there's like 10 fields, even though there's a whole lot more fields in there. And if I want this to be the first column when I pull up that list, I can make that the first column. So you have all these capabilities. We can even put, we call them details, or you can think of it as like a relationship where I could put, if this is an account, maybe I want to pull all the related transactions for that account. So maybe I'm pulling, some from receivables, some from payables, some from, GL or inventory, whatever it may be. You can pull that related information and have different lists connected. Okay, let's go back to this tool. Should be done. So just to show you, it looks like it finished up. And if we go by status, looks like we only have skipped and success. So nothing failed on us. But if something did fail, we could actually just check. Well, here, let me just show you. You could, like this one, there's no data in it. That's why this one was skipped. But if, let's say I went and put some data in that list, I could hit the checkbox and choose to run it again. And so then it will run just that one list. And again, it skipped it again because there's still no data in there. So just to show you that. Okay, the second part to this though is, right, instead of running the quick queries, I can actually do that whole insurance policy, right? So this is now saying, hey, we're gonna move the entire database at this point in time. Okay, so we'll make sure that we're logged into the right account. Okay, we have the right data lake. Still pointing to the same SL server. And then now you see it looks a little different, right? It doesn't have companies anymore. It has the databases because now it doesn't care. So each of these databases have a couple companies in, and then obviously the system database we can back up as well. But again, if you don't want to back up this one, for example, you don't have to. And so you can just start the process. Now, this is a little different. Like I said, this is basically gonna take all of the tables in there. So you don't have to do anything hard. You just go. And you'll see, it looks like there's 1,000 tables that it's gonna be cranking through. So we probably won't wait to the end of this, but I just want to let you know that these are two powerful options. You can run them both. You may run them more than one time, right? Because a lot of times we're seeing when people are transitioning is that they may run it as a process that they have some data in there for the user acceptance, testing and training the team that's using it, and then right right when they're ready to go live, they may run this again so that you can have the latest data as you're getting ready to, maybe turn off that SL server for good. So anyway, some really cool tools that you have available at your disposal. And again, there's with the Popdock subscription, this is in there. There's no additional charge for this tool. Well, let's just kind of wrap it up here. A couple of key points is that, again, this tool is going to allow you to securely connect to your Dynamics SL data and extract everything out of it. You shouldn't be missing anything. You should be able to, right from the Popdock interface, and again, maybe even more importantly, the one that's embedded inside of Acumatica, we can actually access any of that historical SL data. This tool allows you to quickly and easily move it without being a developer. So I think that's a really big part. Again, some people are still really scared of Azure Data Lakes. Hopefully I maybe demystified that a little bit, but it's still something that this is a tool that we've tried to make for end users to handle this. And then again, the most important thing, right? This wouldn't matter much if we just extracted it. It's really about how I can access it, and probably more importantly, instead of just in a web application like Popdock, by embedding it right inside of Acumatica. And the example I showed today was just on like a dashboard, but like some other examples we gave is I maybe would want to just pull the customer's receivables information on the customer page, or maybe if I went to vendor, right, I might want to see all of the payments for that. So I don't want to see all payments for all vendors. I only want to filter it down. So being able to essentially grab the field from that page and filter the data is a really powerful part of Popdock. Okay, so let's open it up for questions now and see what we have out there. Again, if you do have questions, I would encourage you to use the questions pane of the GoToWebinar, and we'll get through as many as we can. So, okay, first one here is how far back for SL? Okay, how many versions of SL can we go back to? So for the list section that we talked about, we call those quick queries in SL, and that only was introduced in 2011. So it has to be 2011 on up to get those quick queries. Can we access data prior to that? Yes, right. We can do all of the tables. That's not really version specific. It's just the lists are really those quick queries. So that's that part of it. So, yep, basically 2011 on up for the quick queries. Otherwise, anything SQL based, we should be able to get our hands on and archive it. Okay, here's one just asking if we can get a copy of the webinar to share with your clients. Yeah, you will get a recording that after this is done, and so you'll get a link that you could share with your team members or other clients that may need to see this as well. Okay, can it display other data from other systems? Oh yeah, okay, yeah, we were obviously showing stuff that was coming from an Azure Data Lake, but if you had a quick eye, I actually had a tab in there that said, information from Salesforce, or it could be coming from e-commerce systems, or I don't know, it could be coming from Braintree or Stripe or whatever it is. We can pull data from all of those different places. Okay, and all right, here's the last one I have in there. Does this tool work with other products like GP or Nav or QuickBooks? Yes. So right now, again, what I was showing you there is we have GP and SL, and Nav is still just going through the final testing. We're also going to have an option for SQL that's coming very, very soon as well. And finally, QuickBooks was mentioned. That's something that that's not in there right now, but it's something we're going to look at in the next year. So we're trying to provide this mechanism with this tool to make it very, very easy for you to point to whatever the data is and archive it, and then make it available right inside of Acumatica or other systems if you're using that as well. All right, I think that's the last question that I have. So I just want to thank everyone for their time today. Thank you for spending it with us. Hopefully you learned a little bit more. And if you have some further questions about anything, whether it's pricing or technical, email sales@e1solutions.com and we'll get you connected to the right people. So thank you and have a wonderful day, everyone.